So, as John was saying, I'm going to talk about developing an evaluation methodology for immersive learning experiences in a virtual world, which is an area which is relatively unexplored. I say that relatively because, of course, then somebody might suddenly say, oh, there's a whole load of studies that I've missed. But as far as we know, there aren't that many studies out there that have followed this area. So I've worked with my colleagues Henaro and Fotis and George Magoulas and Alexandra Poulivassilis from the University of London as well, to start exploring this area. So just to talk a little bit about this. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about virtual worlds and immersive learning experiences as a whole, picking up on a brief typology that I've developed in one of the reports I've written for the GIST called Serious Virtual Worlds. I'll give you the link at the end. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about the My Plan Second Life study, which has started to look at this area around how we use evaluation methodologies to study Second Life activities. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about the methodology that we've adopted, and then some of the results from the study, and then some conclusions finally. So I just wanted to start with quite a broad, it's kind of almost stepping back a bit from, we've been into a lot of detail in quite a lot of different areas. I just wanted to kind of give a bit more kind of step back and look at the overall kind of typologies of virtual worlds. So this is just basically a kind of first draft of a typology which I've developed, which is something which I see as more as a starting point than a set typology. So it's work in progress, really. So just to quite quickly talk about these five categories. There is an additional category which isn't actually listed here, which is called Young Worlds, but I've kind of kept that out because I've been looking at plus 16, post 16 learners in particular. So, of course, the first area that we have to talk about is role-play worlds. So this includes things like World of Warcraft and Guild Wars and EverQuest, etc. These have obviously been extremely popular, and also kind of show this kind of convergence between games and virtual worlds. Now, the one kind of major problem here is for using this for learning purposes. There hasn't really been much evidence so far. I know there's a number of studies being undertaken at the moment, but there hasn't been that much evidence for how this can be used for learning. But we do envisage that this will have learning potential in the future. The one that I've really highlighted today is obviously the social worlds area. We've talked about the links with Second Life and obviously active worlds and a whole range of other social worlds such as Happy Hotel, Club Penguin for children. And these are basically kind of worlds without specific quests, so there isn't really so much structure often in these worlds. And they're primarily for kind of social communication, social interactions. And this is kind of what we found a little bit in our study, is that we did use Second Life. We did find this kind of social dimension was far more successful than some of the other dimensions of the study, but I'll talk about that a little later. Working worlds I talk about in this way. We were doing some work actually with Sun Microsystems, but something like Project Wonderland is a good example of that. It's a kind of 3D kind of video conferencing software, is kind of, for want of a better word. They may disagree with me on that, but anyway, that's kind of how I see that, and it's used much more for working kind of context. Then, of course, there's the training worlds, things like the Olive platform, the Forterra's Olive platform, which are specifically for training, with a real focus on training. And that's been used by, sorry, this has got an animation on it. That's been used by the military predominantly, but also it's beginning to be used in different areas now. And then last but not least, of course, there's the mirror worlds, which basically try to replicate, obviously, the real world, the physical world. And obviously examples of that are things like Google Earth, Planet Earth, and so on. So we also do feel that this has got actually quite a lot of potential for education and training, particularly for mashups between virtual worlds and other kinds of technologies, in particular social software and virtual worlds, or social software mirror worlds and virtual worlds, or also integrating games technologies. So we see that that's actually quite a nice area for learning in the future going forward. But at the moment, for this study, we did focus more on the social worlds area. And then the other thing I tried to do in the report, the Serious Virtual Worlds report, was to kind of put forward 6 attributes of virtual worlds, factors that need to be considered when you're using virtual worlds. And this we're kind of trying to use as a kind of basis for a set of metrics going forward with some work that I'm doing with Steve Jarvis in particular, going forward in the future to try and use these as kind of metrics to help us to evaluate which kinds of virtual worlds can be used in which contexts. So obviously in this area, as you can see, the main areas that highlighted are kind of learner control obviously is an important aspect, collaboration, persistence, 3D interaction and experience. The inclusion of shareable and user-generated content is obviously a big factor, and also that's where the kind of social software tools kind of fit in quite well. And then this kind of area around immersion and interactivity. The immersion and interactivity, it's quite a difficult area at the moment. I mean, there's been some models put forward, but I think immersion as a general category is obviously problematic at the moment. But we need to do more studies actually to find out a little bit more about that. And I'd like to kind of try and point people into that area in the future for trying to help us to push the field on a little bit.